Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone who's come into us this morning and made the trip. Lovely sunny morning here today, but it's great to have you and to have you inputting into why and how we promote STEM subjects, you know. I suppose my background is I worked in Science Foundation Ireland for a while, so I was involved a little bit with the sort of Discover Science programmes, and at that time they were doing research, you know, into why aren't more girls, you know, taking up STEM subjects? You know, what is it? Or is there something we're not thinking about? So they did survey, they did research into this. And what it came back to, one of the points I took away, out of the report, and what it came back to me for, was that the key thing for young girls was a role model and someone that they knew, whether it was their mum or an aunt or an older sister or someone in their either family or friend circle that they could point to, that here is someone who has done this, whether it's gone on to do physics or whether it's someone who's gone on to be a chemist or someone who's like, you know, working in the hospital, in the labs in the hospital, or someone who's using science in their day-to-day job. And science and STEM subjects can be used in so many different ways. I mean, if I asked each one of you to list the careers, I'd say we'd be here for, well, a while. You'd be thinking of everything and anything and things that people would never even think of. I might actually do that at the end if we have time. Maybe 2 careers people would never associate with STEM subjects. If each of you can think of that, I might ask each of you to give me an idea on that. But it really, I suppose, knocked me a little bit for 6, because we talk about all of these things about investment, which is crucial, and bringing down class sizes, yes, and how it's always more expensive, especially at 3rd level, around doing science, engineering, because you have all the equipment costs, you know, the lab space. If you're doing history, which is what I did, history and French in college, well, you know, history probably, it's not that you need a huge amount of equipment to be able to do your research or to do your study. But I feel that we look at all of these things that we do need to put in place, especially with a rising population. But I also do think about that one point, that it is within that family circle, that role model, and how do we break into that? How do we make an impact for young women to sort of say, listen, here is, and it's not someone that's in a, you know, it's not someone on I don't know, Dancing with the Stars or whatever. It's not someone that's, you know, a real celeb that they're looking to. They're looking to someone that they know who comes from the same place as them, who has done something like this, and that they could see themselves in that position. And I suppose that's what I look to, especially because I come from sort of a more regional area, but we have some excellent schools. And I know you were just speaking there about schools, but we actually got an opportunity with Minister Norma Foley to go to some of the schools in Roscommon town itself. And we went to the Convent of Mercy, and I was just looking it up here again, but they have a design lab. So this is one of the, I suppose, girls' schools in Roscommon. I mean, so many more schools now are co-ed, I know, but in this school they actually have a design lab, and all the girls in there were learning things like woodwork, but tech side of things. I mean, it was really impressive. I hadn't known about it. So I just remember thinking that our schools are really doing it so much, and particularly our secondary schools, to really equip our students for the future. And I suppose so anyway, those are just a few thoughts that I have. But I suppose my questions to you would be, maybe to some of you, maybe just around that role model. And are there any ideas you have on this? I understand the elements around investment and all of this, but is there anything around role models, particularly say at national school, secondary school, and maybe at 3rd level? And I might just point that to IMTO maybe, and to maybe just at the 2nd level space, and then maybe also for it's EMER, sorry, isn't it? Sorry, apologies. Just in terms of 3rd level in colleges, in our colleges. I know just the other aspect I might just point to as well is that in a lot of our engineering courses, and I worked in the research office, I suppose, in the University of Galway, was that in the science and engineering space, you can have, you know, the teams, they're looking to make sure that their teams are balanced, you know, their PhD teams and the teams that are working with PIs. But sometimes they're taking a lot of students from abroad, you know, because maybe there's not as many students that are doing those subjects here locally in Ireland, you know, and I suppose that's the challenge we have, is that bringing that excellence and cultivating it indigenous as well as, you know, obviously that there's great talent that we have that comes from abroad as well. So those are just a couple of thoughts, and I suppose my actual questions then would be just thank you for your submissions, but also maybe to ask those questions around just the two career choices for someone that you would never think of doing a STEM subject if anything comes to mind, right? Either physics, biology, chemistry or engineering. And then also just what other elements could we do around that role model space that is something we could support teachers with or parents associations with, or again, bringing students into third level to visit our labs, like our IRC, SFI funded labs and everything. I know that an awful lot of the students also go out to schools, but is there something else that you think we could be doing in that particular space? And I might ask if whoever would like to comment, please do. Please do.
I think of physics and snooker players, actually.
Excellent. I'll have to ask now to give me a little bit.
And also soccer players, but snooker players and physics. The role model piece, we spoke earlier, Paul Crone spoke earlier about business in the community and, links with industry. And I know business in the community as a concept exists, but I do think that it needs to be more centralised, and we need to look at it on a much wider scale. And engagement from a very young age, from early childhood, from primary school. I know the Department of Education a number of years ago put in place some protocols with technology companies engaging with schools, but it was at a very basic level. And I do think we need to look at that and to encourage all students to see women in be they snooker players or soccer players, in their jobs, and how STEM comes into jobs we wouldn't normally think about. I was privileged to engage in an NCCA consultation with children on STEM back before Christmas, and their perceptions were fascinating, and they were so broad-minded in their concept of STEM. And you talked about labs and design lab there, and as part of our submission we've talked about creative spaces in schools. Not every school can have a lab, but I think we need to look at providing more creative spaces, more creative and open learning spaces. We've been focused so long in this country for the provision of classroom accommodation only, and we travel to other countries where they have very creative construction of their schools that allows much more flexible use, and I think particularly at primary and in early childhood that would give huge possibilities from the point of view of STEM, and also the development of outdoor spaces. A lot of our schools do have outdoor space, but I think it needs to be developed, it needs to be looked at from a much more creative and educational point of view, and particularly schools that don't have access to huge amounts of space, particularly inner city schools, a bit of a concrete jungle, I suppose, that we need to look at how those spaces could be developed. And Trinity is only down the road. They have done fabulous things with putting beehives on roofs and roof gardens. Why can't we think about like that in our schools as well, and be much more creative about our spaces, with probably less investment than we would think would be required.
And that's absolutely true. And I think what's really nice about those design lab spaces is being able to walk about. You're not sitting down in a chair, suddenly you're walking about and ideas are coming to you as you're moving about the space.
And the collaboration and cooperation that allows to happen, like in any workplace we all work in now, where we bounce ideas off each other, it gives the pupils those skills from a very young age, that collaborative, that team building, that teamwork, that bouncing ideas. It's hugely beneficial.
And thank you. I just, as you say, it doesn't take too much. I mean, I've seen a school as well locally in Ballinasloe, Korean National School, and they're using all their outdoor space. They've really put their minds to it about how to, they're doing outdoor, gardening and everything, and vegetable patches and all of this. But
and
also
that's all STEM
spaces. Exactly.
That's all STEM, and
it's all bring it in.
There's a huge development, particularly post-COVID, of outdoor classrooms in a lot of schools, and I think we should be encouraging that.
And umbrellas. And sorry, if I might as well, if we have time for people to comment.
3 minutes.
Sorry, if you want to go, and then I can bring in a few others. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you very much. In terms of STEM,
do you want to come in?
I saw David's hand first.
Okay, right, okay.
Yeah, we
don't mind.
No.
Okay. In terms of STEM careers and STEM subjects, I'm probably the wrong person to ask, because my wife is a scientist in a diagnostic lab in a hospital. So I hear that.
But in terms, model already in the family.
in terms of careers that I tend not to think of, perhaps on first instance in relation to STEM, is probably in the area of construction studies and design, construction, graphics, that sort of thing. And in the context of apprenticeships and changes there, and in terms of retrofitting and so on, those are areas that are obviously incredibly important.
That's great. Thank you.
In terms of role models, yep, we certainly could benefit from a more diverse teaching profession. A number of colleagues in the higher education institutions along the West Coast have done quite a lot of work around this. I think the big issue here probably relates to the opportunity and financial cost of the longer period of initial teacher education. You're talking 6 years in many cases, and that in order to even contemplate spending 6 years in college studying to be a teacher, you need to have quite a bit of social capital and financial capital to begin with. Yeah. So it does, in terms of a more diverse teacher profession, that would be helpful. Just in terms of programmes that could be helpful, and Maureen had quite rightly pointed out about outdoor classrooms and so on, there's some really good initiatives that happen. I know the hearings last week looked at them in detail, that can be useful. One that might be well worth the time of the committee having a look at is in the North East. There's the programme, the North Eastern Further and Higher Education Alliance. It's a collaboration between the Institute of Technology in Dundalk and the LMETB and a number of the local businesses. So that may be well worth having a look at. Also, a lot of the institutions in line with businesses in the area also do a lot of sort of QQI level 5 for students whose maths ability wouldn't be great, and in order to do a STEM subject in higher education or further education, they might need to do that. I'd also note this week is Engineers Week. However, I would just put in one word of caution in terms of support from businesses. Very valuable and important though that is, we do tend to find that's great if the school or college is located close to, if I can use the example of a multinational company, for example, and a lot of support can be provided. But if you're a small institution in a rural area, it's not always as simple. And the other word of caution I would put in, as we see when if the economy isn't doing as well as it maybe has recently, those supports for educational institutions are often the first ones that businesses cut. Now, I absolutely understand why they do that, but if we're going to mainstream something, it needs to be available all the time to everybody.
Thank you so much. Apologies for just cutting. I just want to allow maybe Maura in as well, and Caitlin and Beth, if that's all right. Sorry, and if we have time, my apologies. And we're trying to get to a few, so if you'd like to go.
I found that a hairdresser for chemistry.
Oh,
yeah.
Great.
And in terms of your question for a role model, with the, I would say, the alarming anecdotal data we've gotten from our consultations, I really do welcome your point to studying STEM young, because sexism and discrimination that we've seen isn't born. You're not born with it. It's taught. It's an environment and it's fostered within the school system. So that's something that I really do welcome. I really take your point in there. So that's what I
Thank you
just
so
reiterate that. But other ways that they can kind of see themselves doing this subject or continuing to pursue it would be in the practicals and the continuous assessments. Not only are they able to take ownership of the subject and put it into their day-to-day lives or something that interests them, they'd be able to kind of take it with them and use it in a way that they see fit, and also with all the instances of being innovative, creative, a collaboration amongst peer-to-peer. I think a continuous assessment is always something that the ICU recommends, and we're always advocating for students on that front. In terms of non-educational forms of learning of STEM, with BTY Young Scientists, SkyFest, the transition year program in particular, which is great for kind of seeing outside of the school area. What more potential can I take with this STEM subject? So those are the kind of
ambition,
things I like to
driving hard. Thank you so much. And sorry, Maura.
So you've asked a very good question. We all want to come in and give our little insights.
to see how the chair is feeling.
And the chair is under pressure of time. I'm very conscious of. I just want to say two things, which is kind of off the point, but I think they are important. For me, the two are the climate activist and the farmer. And I think that's interesting, because if you think of a farmer, you think of a good old practical fellow who couldn't or woman increasingly. Think of
Yes,
the new leader of the Social Democrats. You don't think of someone who's cultured in a science education, and yet if you think of the climate activist, you see someone who's politically active. But actually, if you look at the fundamentals of farming and climate change, they are deeply, deeply scientific spaces. So I do think that there is a kind of a culture change around that, the way we talk about STEM as if it's something out there, not integrated with our lives. The second point I would make, and I think it's really important that this committee and the national report and the implementation plans are looking at gender uptake, but I think at our peril we would omit to also look at ethnic uptake and socioeconomic uptake. Like, these are very, very profound, shall we say, structural and systemic sources of inequality in society. So I would be concerned that our policy is exclusively framed on gender, because within you also have those two other categories, which I think really needs to be looked at.
You're
Thank
absolutely
you.
right, and that's where the DESH, I suppose, hopefully that, that expansion of DESH that we're seeing, like nearly 1 in 4 schools, and maybe expansion to post-primary as well, would be crucial. Is there another minute, or? Sorry, Beth, sorry, do you mind? Thank you.
So job-wise, I did music technology in Leaving Cert, so that was the only STEM I engaged with. But I guess if we want to look at increasing the amount of role models that people have, whether that's on a gender basis or socioeconomic basis, the way to do that is by bringing the learning of STEM back into our communities. Not everybody needs to get a PhD in a STEM course. There should be a huge amount of focus on bringing STEM into our FEs and ensuring that community-based learning around STEM subjects is focused on, and it's not just seen as something that you have to go into a QQI level 8 degree to engage with. STEM can be learned at all levels, but that also means that STEM should be looked at in a lifelong learning perspective, and not just primary, post-primary and degree level. We should also have a huge amount of FE courses in the specific skills where we're facing shortages in employment, and the emerging skills. We need to look at smaller courses for things like artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, so that we can bring those skills into our local communities and create more role models that way.
Completely. Connected living. I think lifelong learning is one of those things that Ireland could really rank a lot higher in. So, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Chair.